Good evening, Californios. It's June 18th, 2022, and this is Season 2, podcast number 16. We are Red Star Report. I'm Hal G. Lohr, and this is Voices for the California Nation. For tonight, with the January 6th hearings, latest shootings, and inflation news dominating the national media, and a surge in COVID-19 cases, and the California primary elections dominating local news, I thought tonight's theme could be California independence movement stuff that flew under the radar. So, let me start off by giving a shout out to the California National Party and the CNP candidates who just finished running in the state local primaries. Well done. And always remember that even when we don't achieve election victories, a lot of times just being recognized and being on the ballot for a third party and third party candidates is a win. Because this is how we normalize the California independence movement, by getting it out there in front of people. California National Party, keep up the good fight, everyone. On that note, Red Star Report has another feel-good segment of Edited to Conclusion to show you. This is from California Governor Gavin Newsom and Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau's Climate Change Pact signing at the California Science Center in Los Angeles on June 9th, 2022, featuring all the familiar California independence movement talking points, plus a new one that Gavin Newsom interjected into the conversation as a joke. If you haven't heard this one, you're going to like it. Enjoy.
One of the things that I'm very prideful of, and also very mindful of, and I imagine Canadian citizens are mindful of, is, democracy in the United States, like democracies around the rest of the world, are threatened. And even with more stability in that frame, folks like me come and go. It's important for folks to know, in California it's a little bit different. We're a $3.36 trillion a year economy, the fifth largest economy in the world. I say that not to impress, but to impress upon your point. We punch above our weight, and we carry a lot of weight as it relates to low-carbon green growth, as it relates to efforts to change the way we produce and consume energy, regardless of who's in the White House, regardless of what's happening in Washington, D.C. And it's my pleasure to introduce the man who, by the way, will get California in the G7. That is the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau.
We've seen it over the years where a federal government is unwilling, or because of log jams, and in this case Republican interference, unable to actually move forward on the kind of climate leadership that's necessary. And California's consistent leadership matters not just for the weight of the Californian economy and population, but it's an example of how to do things, how to look at climate change as a crisis that needs to be responded to, but also a tremendous opportunity moving forward on inclusive economic growth, giving real opportunity for everyone to succeed. These are the kinds of things that we know doesn't just build a strong economy, it builds a strong, resilient community and society.
We are investing in global leadership by taking a network and launching a new network of satellites to address global emissions of methane. We're grateful for. than the Prime Minister of Canada took the time to come to California and be here to sign this memorandum of cooperation. Thank you all very, very much.
Riddle me this. A world leader in economics, a world leader in technology, a world leader in agriculture, and a world leader on climate change walk into a bar. So, what California wine does the governor order? It's amazing. I mean, I know for California independence movement stuff, these media conversations that talk about California like this are a great way to normalize the idea of California as a nation. I mean, that's all good. It's just funny to us at Red Star Report that Governor Newsom can dismiss CalExit as a non-option on one hand and then drop CalExit talking points like bombs regularly at press conferences on the other. I know Gavin Newsom has big red California stars in his eyes for a run for the presidency of the United States, but come on, dude. If there's one thing out there the American Republicans and Democrats agree on, it's that they don't want a progressive, socialistic, democratic California president. I mean, have you heard the way flyover state Democrats or Bible Belt Democrats or Rust Belt Democrats talk about Californians? Face it, the Democratic Party establishment may love you as governor, but they will fix the primaries, just like they did in 2016, to nominate centrist puppets like Stacey Abrams or Cory Booker or Amy Klobuchar or even Hillary Clinton again for president before they will nominate you. Sorry, Gavin. But the reality is that just like Bernie Sanders, you would be considered a candidate of last resort. Go back and look at the Bill Clinton versus Jerry Brown race if you don't believe me. So, just saying, next time you're asked, you might want to hesitate for a moment before you dismiss CalExit as a viable political alternative. Just saying. Besides, I mean, really, why would you not want to consider being a possible future president of an evolving global superstar like California? That's instead of merely presiding over the collapse of a fading empire like the United States as that president. I mean, really. This is Voices for the California Nation. For our next segment, Red Star Report presents part 2 of the latest installment of Book Review California with Sue Hirsch. Tonight, Sue brings you California author Tchouki G L Miner and a discussion of her book about Israel and the Palestinians, Children from Heaven. That starts now.
Let me remind my listeners, folks, if you're listening today, we're talking to Tchouki Miner about her book, Children from Heaven. And to research that book that she wrote, she went to the Middle East and did a lot of research about the war in the Middle East that seems to just go on and on. But it really started in remind me, Tchouki?
1948 was when they made and that's an amazing story between Ben Gurion and what went on and
remind us, Tchouki, again, please, what Ben Gurion did.
Well, Ben Gurion came from a background in what was then Russia, Polansk, and now it's Poland. But they came from ordinary Jewish backgrounds, and they were part of the early Zionist movement. And he went when he was very young, in his early 20s, to Palestine. and he worked to create. They were all working under the British mandate at that time in Palestine to this fledgling Israeli state. They called it the Hydrostat, this community of Jewish settlers working clandestinely under the British mandate. And Dr. Chaim Weizmann was very different. He was the most distinguished scientist, physician, inventor. He invented acetone and author of books. And he was very much more inclined. He was working very hard for peace with the Arabs and doing anything to avoid war. And when they had this declaration that made Israel a sovereign state, that day, they had made sure he was sent, Dr. Weizmann, that is, outside the country on a diplomatic mission, because they had a vote before they made that declaration that Israel was now a sovereign state, whether they should have a truce and try to talk to the Arabs first. And it was voted down.
Do we know how?
The last thing Gurion wanted was for Weizmann to be there because he knew he could be a deciding vote against it.
Was Golda Meir's vote counted?
Oh, yeah, she was there. She hated the idea of war. She said it's deplorable. She did everything she could. She went in disguise and talked to King Abdullah, the grandfather of the current head of Jordan, in the dead of night, trying to avoid this. And she was just an amazing person. David Ben-Gurion called her the only real man on his cabinet, just to give you an idea of the staggering, towering character that was Golda Meir.
I'm going to turn the tables now and mention that Palestinians have also committed violent acts against Israel, but when they do it, they're called terrorists. And when Israel does it, a lot of people think that it's called collateral damage. Why is that?
Of Israel, it all goes back to the Holocaust. The West failed the Jewish community. You know that at the time when Hitler came to power, it was right before, it was right around the First World War. Germany had such a great culture and art and painting and music, and everyone had a Jewish friend. They said every shop owner. It was so civilized. And when that collapsed and the worst atrocities ever committed against the Jews in the West culminated there in the Holocaust under the Third Reich. People really, really in the West just unequivocally tended to support Israel otherwise. Also, there is the matter of the West is going to identify with the Israelis because they are like a Western style democracy, although all of them obviously have flaws, because Ashkenazi Jews are quote unquote white and they're part of Western history. Palestinians are not. They're poor. They don't have a democracy. They had more or less the old class system, although that's not completely true. They had a big, prosperous merchant class in Israel and Gaza. But the fact is they're Muslim in the Arab community in Palestine.
Absolutely. Americans, we're so weird. We love to draw Jesus Christ. Well, we love to draw Jesus Christ as this white man with this long beard. And he came from the Middle East. So there were no white people in that time in the Middle East. Yeah. He had to be black or brown. So let's see. On to the next question here, because we got to keep moving on. We've got just this one more, but it's kind of a long one. It's in a few parts. So let's start with this thought. If the ancient land of Israel had been in Texas, can it be surmised that the Texans would have all happily agreed to leave their homes and live in other states?
If you, no matter what the reasons, how good the reasons, when you define a state, the primary factor of it is its ethnicity, you're going to end up with a racist social and political system. Palestine, they said, we had the Zionists, they said, we had this terrible time and now we need our land back and you have to go. How would you feel? No Texan would ever leave Texas to go live in another state. If someone said, like 100 years ago, this happened to us, now we need it back. And you have to go. We're the original Texans, you aren't. I mean, it absolutely refusing to face the fact that the Palestinian Arab community in Palestine had every much, if not more, because they've been there for 2,000 years long.
Was there ever a time when Jewish Israelis were asked to leave Israel? And
a lot of Arabs wishes, but it's very strong. They have never been subjected to. They're in control of that region. They've never been subjected to expulsions, but they expelled many Palestinians in that war, and the figure is, it's just under dispute for decades how many were actually expelled and or killed.
Why does the international community unequivocally accept the exile and confiscation of Palestinian homes and properties, which occurred in 1948?
Maybe a lot of people simply did not know how many. It was between 750,000 and 1.5 million. And it's very difficult to secure the full amount of people that were expelled. They did not know, for example, that the Irgun, the Lehi, which was the outlawed army of the most fanatical Zionists, Menachem Begin may have been one of them. They would just go in and randomly shoot people, just spreading terror to get them to leave. And there was the infamous massacre at Deir Yassin, in which Nazi-like atrocities were committed in Israel for a long time. We refused to acknowledge that it happened. Now finally it's coming out.
Kind of brings to mind the question, why is Israel accepted into the family of nations, knowing all these things that you've just mentioned? Is this a political gambit?
It is. Yes, you answered. It's a political pressure technique and a gambit that the U.S., once again, ultimately, you can't answer completely. It really is mysterious why they just have chosen to unequivocally support Israel no matter what. And when the dark side comes out, all of these facts and factors, they still go on supporting it and insisting that it be in the family of nations. And I think many European heads of state question it, but Europe is not that strong. It's the United States that has the most powerful military buildup in the world. Some people, compare it to the resurrection of ancient Rome. And, people say power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. And there are many issues here and they're all linked.
Let me remind our readers one more time of your book. Can you mention the name of your book and where we can find it, please?
Yes, it's called Children from Heaven, and you can buy it directly from Author House, the publishing company in Bloomington, Indiana. You can go into any bookstore, in any English-speaking country, United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK and order it. You can buy it in an ebook on Amazon, Look Press, which is Barnes and Nobles, iTunes, and two others I can't remember. But that's just an ebook. The actual book has to be ordered from a bookstore or from Ingram or whatever the bookstore handles that, or from Author House. You can just order, online.
Tchouki, in what year did you first begin traveling in the Middle East in order to research your book?
Well, I went about 8 times altogether. It was all throughout the 1990s. And then the last time was 2001. I was there for 7 weeks throughout the summer.
At least a decade. I'm terrible at math, but that's at least a decade that you put into researching your book by traveling. My name is Sue Hirsch for Book Review California, RSR Reports or Red Star Reports. Thank you so much for being with us, Tchouki.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Back to you, Hal.
Thank you, Sue. That was part 2 of this interview with Tchouki G L Miner about her book, Children from Heaven, as Red Star Report brings you another segment of Book Review California with Sue Hirsch. To find a copy of Children of Heaven, or Children from Heaven, by Tchouki G L Miner, Red Star Report will list the Amazon link in the description below. Shankar Singham has the night off, so Activism in Action will return next week. But let's go to talking points. Tonight on Talking Points, I would like to answer a not-so-frequently asked question. A question that comes to the California independence movement from the extremely conservative Washington Examiner and its columnist, Conn Carroll, who wrote an obviously inflammatory question from an article last week that, although nobody is apparently talking about it, at least at the moment, it sounds very much like the kind of question that the California haters out there would ask about California independence. And it goes like this. So, when did California become so racist? A question that would probably surprise most Californians, considering everything from the U.S. Census to bestneighborhoods.org list California as one of the most diverse places in the continental United States. We have a diversity rating of 94 out of 100. So what fascist shit-talking are they trying to create with this "when did California become so racist" accusation? Let's break that down for a minute, though. First, as an educated guess, and considering they went so far as to denigrate the 1619 Project in the Washington Examiner article itself, I'd say right-wing fears of critical race theory probably have a lot to do with this obvious logical fallacy whataboutism question. But what really rubbed salt into the wound here was last month's interim report from the California Task Force to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. A report that reinforced historical facts and stated categorically, today, 160 years after the abolition of slavery, its badges and incidents remain embedded in the political, legal, health, financial, educational, cultural, environmental, social, and economic systems of the United States of America, without a remedy specifically targeted to dismantle the country's racist foundations and heal the injuries inflicted by colonial American governments. The badges and incidents of slavery will continue to harm African Americans in almost all aspects of life. Now, that's straight out of the report. But in a USA rapidly devolving into fascism, desperate to deny that racism, slavery, voter suppression, lynching, segregation, etc. were ever really that big a problem in America. California's admission of a shared racist American past denies the ultra-conservative notion that America is always the good guy. Very bad for the narrative. Red State America's denial of actual American history and the hopeless vilification of the 1619 Project's critical race theory all crash and burn under the spotlight of the undocumented truth. Black Americans fleeing the Jim Crow East were welcomed with redlining, segregation, and police brutality in the West. California legislatively admitting this fundamental truth is a real problem for them. So they ask, when did California become so racist? Well, first answer. When it became necessary for alt-right pundits to take a page out of the Joseph Goebbels propaganda playbook and accuse progressive California of being the racist nation that white Christo-fascist MAGA hat America actually is. This scandal rag article in the Washington Examiner tries to cite California's black populations moving out of big coastal cities as fundamentally racist. That's their premise. That's a big stretch. I mean, to blame rising housing prices that affect every Californian on racism, particularly when the right-wing press is tripping over itself to report on how so many disenchanted middle-class white people are leaving California for the same reasons. Is that racism? But like the politically inflated myth of California's decline due to the exodus numbers based on a universally flawed Trumpian 2020 census, let's sucker punch these fascist pundits squarely in their dumber than a California fifth grader math skills, shall we? The Washington Examiner claims California must be a racist state because the percentage of black people living in California has gone from 7.6% in 1980 to 5.7% in 2020. Really? Okay. Even if we ignore the fact that although African Americans average 12% of the overall U.S. population, most of them never lived in the West. But just looking at California's black population, we get numbers like these. And this is math, so I'll go slow. In 1980, the California population was 23,667,902 people. Now, if you multiply that by 7.6%, the black population of California in 1980 was 1,798,761. That's 1,800,000. Round up. Now, again, math, so in 2020, California's population is 39,538,223, according to the census. 40 million. You multiply that 39 million people by 5.7% as a black population, you get 2,253,671 black people. So California's black population between 1980 and 2020 increased by 454,910 people. That's called math. And you can't call that a declining population. Look, I know this is hard for little red state minds to understand, but California's population from 1980 to 2020 has basically grown from 24 million to 40 million people. So you can knock off the whole California failing and California exodus bullshit already. Fox News quoting a within margin of error or of zero 0.8 percentage drop in California's population from a racially skewed 2020 census taken during a pandemic where terrified volunteers just guessed at a lot of the numbers is fucking meaningless. The truth is, the reason California's black and white populations, for that matter, have gone down is because California's brown, Asian, Pacific Island, and mixed race percentages have all gone up over the last 40 years. You see, that's how percentages work. So when did California become so racist? I don't know. Maybe it was when the Spanish missionaries started to assimilate Native Americans. Or maybe it really started when American 49ers in the California Gold Rush started putting bounties on the scalps of indigenous people. Maybe it was when American settlers robbed Mexican Californios of their land and all their possessions. Maybe it was when Americans in San Francisco began forming anti-Chinese political clubs. Maybe it was when Los Angeles started redlining neighborhoods and building freeways to block away people. Maybe it was the Zoot Suit riots. Maybe it was the Manzanar concentration camps. Maybe it was the Watts riots. Maybe it was Rodney King. Maybe it was the war on drugs. But at least, unlike the United States, the state of California is honest enough to admit there is a problem. And for an independent California, that's a start. So again, I don't know when California became so racist, but I'm pretty sure it happened right after Californians started acting like Americans. But then again, what do you expect when Red State America desperately wants to reframe the question of California as racist? Red State America, emotionally fragile in their white supremacy. A supremacy that denies racism even still exists, as it glorifies founding fathers who wrote America's founding documents that say all men are created equal, written with a quill pen and ink, carried to the signing by a slave. This is Talking Points. That's Red Star Report for the week of 6/18/22. Please check out our website at www.redstarreport.com. And while you're there, subscribe to receive our newsletter, Red Star Review, which will begin publication shortly. I keep saying that. Or you can click on the Red Star Review link below. Subscribe to our Red Star Report YouTube channel, please, 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 please. We need you. We love you. We need you. Go to our Red Star Report Facebook page, Twitter, and Instagram. Give us a like, give us a follow. Because if you want a real California Independence Movement media group, it's all about the algorithms. Thanks to you and all our Red Star Rebels for watching. See you next week. We are Red Star Report.